Have you ever stayed up until 3 a.m. or later because you have been aimlessly scrolling through your For You page on TikTok? Or have you ever been glued to your phone for hours on end, tapping through Snapchat or scrolling through Instagram, Twitter, or even Facebook? Simply because you didn't have anything else to do with your life. I know we all have, especially now that we are stuck inside with little else to do. But we must ask ourselves if it is truly worth it. In all reality, the hours we waste on social media aren't worth it. Social media platforms, which were created to bring people together, separate us and negatively impact our society. Studies have shown that social media instigates our cruelest human desire to compare ourselves to those around us. This curse of comparison makes social media extremely damaging to people's mental and emotional health. Our human desire to compare also makes social media extremely addictive, which is why so many people spend hours at a time on these platforms. Social media can also make you feel extremely isolated. Habitual usage of social media takes you away from the life you are physically living and distracts you from the people around you, thereby weakening our social interaction as a whole society. Even though social media allows you to keep in contact with your friends and family, and may even provide hours of entertainment, it can be extremely destructive to your mental health and negatively impact the way you interact with the world around you. My first point as to why social media negatively impacts our society is that it can be extremely damaging to our mental health. There have been times where I have been on social media and I see pictures of a group of people out on vacation looking like they are just living the best lives they possibly could, while I'm over here stuck at home. I know we have all had moments like these, where we see people on social media living what seems to be a perfect life. When we see these perfect glimpses into other people's lives, we end up making ourselves feel like our lives might be inferior. This is the kind of damage that social media inflicts on our mental health. In a study published by the American Psychological Association, a group of psychologists investigated the social comparison in social media and how it relates to a person's self-esteem. In their study, some participants looked at social media profiles with negative content, which would lead the viewers toward downward comparisons, and other participants looked at profiles with positive content, which would lead to upward comparisons. After viewing the profiles, participants were instructed to fill out self-evaluations. It was discovered after the investigation or experiment that most people who viewed the positive content and made upward comparisons came back with poor self-esteem and with less favorable self-evaluations. This psychological study supported my point that social media rips apart our own self-esteem and makes us truly feel inferior. And humans cannot help but compare. Social media feeds directly into this unhealthy habit. Going on with unhealthy habits, my second point as to why social media has a negative impact on society is that it is extremely addictive. That powerful urge you get to check your social media, or that excitement you feel when you get a notification, stems from this addiction to social media. A paper from the International Journal of Mental Health and Addiction classifies the addiction to social media as a behavioral addiction, which especially affects adolescents and young adults. The paper goes on to identify 6 criteria that determine whether something is addictive and ties it all to social media, ties each of them to social media. The 6 criteria are salience, when people treat social media as the most important thing in their lives; mood modification, which is when a person's mood is dependent on or can easily be changed by their social media; tolerance, which refers to the amount of time needed to acquire the mood-modifying effects that a person desires, which this builds over time; withdrawal symptoms, which include the effects that occur when reducing social media use; conflict, which refers to how social media can damage friendships impact occupational and educational activities, and even cause internal emotional conflict. And finally, relapse, which is the tendency to reestablish addictive social media behaviors after a period of abstinence. I am sure that all of us, at one time or another, have felt at least one, if not more, of these addictive criteria when using social media. Social media is so addictive because it pulls us in and intrigues us with all the dramatics and entertainment it can offer. Just like other addictive substances, habitual social media usage can consume your life and even damage how you interact with the world around you. My third and final point as to why social media negatively impacts our society is that it can be severely isolating. There have been times, which I'm sure you can relate to, where I've been spending time with friends or family, and everyone is just on their phones, on social media, completely ignoring each other, and it results in you feeling completely isolated in a room full of people, which is ridiculous. This just shows how social media destroys people's ability to interact face to face because they're so used to having their focus on social media and their interactions in that realm alone. Not only does social media isolate you from the people you are physically around, it can also make you feel mentally and emotionally isolated. For example, when you see different posts on social media where people are hanging out with their friends or family and they're having a great time, and you reflect on yourself and realize that you're alone and that you don't do that with people, it completely tears you down and makes you feel isolated. In a paper found in the U.S. American Journal of Preventive Medicine, a group of doctors focused on social media use and perceived social isolation among young adults in the U.S. Participants of their study were a nationally representative sample of 1,787 U.S. adults ranged with an age range of 19 to 32, which we all happen to be in that age range. They assessed social media usage by recording both the time used and frequency used. While looking at the amount of time using social media, participants who spent the most time using social media ended up having twice the odds of having greater perceived social isolation. When looking at the frequency of social media usage, those that use social media more frequently had more than 3 times the odds of having greater perceived social isolation. In this study, it was found that increased social media usage was strongly and independently associated with increased perceived social isolation. This just shows and further supports my point that social media is extremely isolating and is destructive to the way that we interact with others. Social media is an extremely dominant and destructive part of our society. It can be very damaging to a person's mental health, making them feel that they are not enough. And being immersed in a platform that is full of seemingly perfect people living seemingly perfect lives points out the flaws in our own lives and makes us feel inferior. Social media is also very addicting. Our addiction to social media as a society leads to hours upon hours of wasted time where we could be making precious memories instead of being so invested in an online world. And finally, social media platforms, which were created to bring people together, are actually extremely isolating. Those who spend the most time on social media are the most isolated from the real world. They become so invested in their social media that the way they interact with the real world can be dramatically damaged. Social media has a negative impact on our society because even though social media allows you to keep in contact with people and can momentarily boost your mood with a funny video, it negatively impacts the way you feel and the way you interact with the world around you. Thank you.